and welcome to my little home pottery studio tour. I'm doing this tour as I'm moving from this space I have created to my new studio, and I wanted a little video to remember this space by. My pottery studio is set up in a double car bay garage. I have one car bay which is 6 meters by 3 meters. It's large and a space I had always dreamed of when I first started pottery, but as I have grown I have needed more space and creature comforts, as you feel all the elements every season in this space, and the only source of natural lighting is when the roller door is open. Regardless, I've loved this space and I wanted to show you before I move. Let's start at the front here and work our way around. This is my workbench where I do most of my glazing. On the table I have a little bowl with a sponge which I use to clean my brushes, and then a little koala I made filled with my favourite brushes I love to glaze with. This is my banding wheel. It's great for working on pieces you don't want to move too much, but I mostly use it for showing off the finished results of all my pieces. In here is where I keep my test tiles of all the colour samples, as well as all my cant wire which I use for making jewellery pieces or ornaments. My first shelf is where I store all my underglazes. I store them in rainbow order because it makes them really easy to access and they look super pretty and organised as well. I have these stamps that I store on top of this box. I also have some hand building tools that don't have a home, and these stains that just live here just cause. The second shelf I have is where all my glazes go, and I also have a few lusters and some projects that I never got around to selling. I have my stamps here and also a jar of corn flour. My top shelf has a lamp, more old works of mine, a paintbrush pot, some carving tools, old found objects from the house, and things I've had since I was a child. This paintbrush holder is full of my nana's old paintbrushes. She no longer practices in art anymore, so gave them to me. She's one of my biggest inspirations. Here are some more works I created and never got around to selling because I fell in love with them. Here is my flower press, which I use a lot, and I also have a little storage tub for all my pressed flowers. I haven't used many of these pressed flowers yet, but I hold on to them for the one day that I can create a magical artwork with them. Here is another artwork that I never got around to making a mould of. This is a little bee cutie. It's totally adorable and I really want to release it as a new design. These are cutters I bought from Sovereign Hill. They are the perfect coaster size, earring size, and everything in between. I love to use these. I also have a tile cutter that I bought to one day make tiles, but I haven't gotten to that project yet. Some old Australian native tins that I love the look of, and an old mug I painted and now use for a pen holder. I also have this skull that I glued dried flowers on for no reason other than to make it look cool. Behind this shelf I have two artworks by Phoebe Hofstede, who creates photography with pressed flowers to make these gorgeous mixed media artworks. I have my Snuggle Pot and Cuddle Pie book that I didn't realise has been ruined by the moisture in this space. I'll keep it forever anyways. May Gibbs has a whimsical imagery that inspires my work a lot. Here is a little pink chroma koala and a Maddie and the Moon artwork that inspires me. Below my shelves is where my pottery wheels live. My wheel throwing has taken a back burner since collecting all the vintage moulds, but I hope to run classes in the future one day. Here is where I store all my work at each of their respective stages. The top two shelves are for works that are at greenware stage, so this is the stage when the clay is still clay and has not been fired yet. The next two shelves is for my pieces at bisque stage. These are pieces that have been through the kiln once to dry them out and need their final glaze firing to finish them off. Sometimes the shelves get mixed around depending on how productive I am. Below here is where all my finished pieces go. Before a shop restock, I try to fill up 3 shelves each month as a goal. I'm just about to have a restock, so I think I'm going to make it. It's so satisfying seeing all this colour after weeks of hard work. Lastly, the bottom shelf is where I store my seconds pieces, which are less than perfect pieces that I'll sell for a discount. I have my container with attachment pieces that I'm leaving in an airtight container that has paper towel to keep the pieces moist until I'm ready to attach them. I have some stained slip for some different projects, and then next to that is all my original works that I make plaster moulds out of. Behind the shelves I have these lovely curtains from Tree of Life, which just make the space feel a little nicer than plain metal walls. These are some old wall hangings and some drying golden wattle, and this old owl clock that was also my nana's. I grew up with this clock and it currently does not work, but when it does the eyes and tails swing. It's very nostalgic and I love it. Here is my locker with a broken piece on the handle that just lives there now. In the lockers I have some aprons and some cotton cloth for working with hand building projects. Here is my first set of storage shelves. This one has a tub full of dry materials that came with the molds. I have sort of just left them there as I've been too busy to experiment with these, but every time I look at them I get inspired because there's so many materials and colours that I could be playing with to stain slip, to play with underglazes and glazes, so it really excites me having this tub in the studio for the one-day projects. There are some things in here that should not be in here, like those blankets. Our house has limited storage, so this shed is a studio, but also a little bit of a house, garden and reno stuff that has ended up here over time. This shelf here has more molds in it. Then we go down to this shelf which has my kiln on it. It's an Olympic kiln model number 1214 FHLE and it has a Bartlett 3K controller. It's at eye level height so I can reach it really easily without bending my back too much. Next to the kiln I have a tub full of kiln stuff. I have a cloth that I use as an oven mitt. I also have lots of spare shelves, stilts, props. I also have some kiln wash and my operator manual for my kiln stored here. The kiln wash goes on the shelves to protect it from glaze and make it easy to remove pieces if you do accidentally have a little glaze drip. This bucket here is full of all my most used tools. This for some reason has become the tool bucket, just by the process of it being empty and me dumping tools in there as I went. It's got trimming tools, carving tools, whisks, hole cutters, rubber kidneys, sponges, brushes and everything in between. It's not the most aesthetic, but it's very spacious and it's been very, very handy having everything all in one place. I have this big black tub which I bought from markets which I don't use anymore because I don't really do markets, so it now stores a lot of random pottery tools as well. The shelf below that has even more molds, and then the one below that even more molds again, some clay, and then on the right I have my tub full of plaster mold making supplies. This back shelf is an accumulation of household storage for the garden and house renos, but the two middle shelves have more plaster molds on them. There's no order and organisation to the molds. They were all sort of just brought in when I bought them, but I will organise them once I know what they are. This trolley is another one of those places where a bunch of stuff has just ended up, so I call it the Tidbit Trolley. The top layer has my sanding pads and respirator mask for working with dry materials. The sanding pads are used for the bases of my pottery pieces to keep them from being coarse. I've also got some grey leads, some watercolour pads that I've done some illustrations, plans and sketches. I've got my Dettol wipes because, you know, hygiene. I've also got some string, some ink from some past projects. I also have my handmade clay painting palettes, and I also have this mirror which I use to suss out different angles of my pottery pieces, as well as using to throwing to make sure I'm throwing straight. The second layer of the Tidbit Trolley has some resin, acetone. I have some different size plugs that still don't fit what I intended them for. I've got this paper bag which I collected when I bought the molds, and it looks like it has some kind of underglaze decals inside which are really beautiful that I can't wait to use. I've got this tube which has some other decorating techniques in there, such as the tissue transfer paper and my screen printing decals. I've also got some random glue, wire and other weird objects that I use once in a blue moon. The bottom tier is just for rubber band storage and just some random boxes that I've left there just cause. This is my pouring table. This table I bought secondhand, which I painted, and I added wheels and a shelf for more storage. The top is where I pour everything, and I try to keep it generally clean, but it is always a mess. At the end of the table are my scrap offcut buckets. This is where I put any failed pieces or offcuts to recycle and use again. I also put these sieves on top of the offcut buckets for my molds to drain out on. These aren't the best as they are a pain to clean, so I will be changing this setup in my new studio. On this shelf, I have all the molds that I've already revealed. This is the only system I have to keep them organized, but as you can see, I've outgrown this system. And then on the other side is all my original design molds, so plaster molds I've designed myself. Below the table is where I store all my mixed clay, my clay bags, and also my glazes. This is the shelves I always film pulling molds from, as it is the best lighting in the studio and looks the nicest. I have some scales throughout that I've collected from op shops. These are used for measuring out materials and clay. I have some old wooden boxes that I use for photo props, and this is my towel basket. They are all found in op shops, and they are old family towels that I have loved and adored and used for my wheel throwing and drying my hands throughout the day. Next to the shelves, I have my larger secondhand kiln. I can't run this yet until I have power upgrades, but it's sitting waiting for its prime time in the new studio. It's currently used as a shelf for photo props, my radio, and a bucket full of rolling pins I use for different hand building projects. There are also some random art supplies here that are from the molds that I haven't tested out yet. Well, that's it, a little tour of my home pottery studio. Thank you so much for joining me. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this.